Now the last capital budgeting technique we're going to talk about now is called the modified internal rate of return. Now the little project that we've been going through now, this is a $100,000 project. The cash inflows each year we estimate to be $22,251 for 10 years, 10-year life, and the weighted average cost of capital for the project is 8%. We've already calculated net present value, it was positive. Our internal rate of return, the traditional internal rate of return, was 18%, much greater than the cost of capital. Our profitability index was 1.49, and our payback period was about 4.5 years. So far everything looks good. We'd like to use rate of return to explain why to accept the project to our boss or our client, but we don't want to use this number right here, 18%. That assumes we reinvest all the cash flows to earn 18% every year for 10 years. That's just not a reasonable assumption to make. Now to get around that now, we're going to calculate what's called the modified internal rate of return. Now the modified internal rate of return is defined as the terminal value of the project, TV, the terminal value of the project, divided by the beginning value of the project, raised to the 1 over n minus 1. Now, as we look at this equation now, the denominator, the beginning value of the project, that's simply the initial investment that you make in the project. In this project, the present value of the outflows, the initial investment, was $100,000. So we know the denominator. All that raised to the 1 over n. N now is the number of years of life of the project, how long the project is going to go on for in years. And in this case, we know it's going to be a 10-year project, so n is equal to 10. And then we're going to subtract 1. So we really, at this point, we know everything but the numerator. Well, the numerator is the terminal value of the project. Now, terminal value is defined as the cumulative future value of all the cash inflows. The cumulative future value of all the cash inflows. Our cash inflow is an annuity of $22,251 that we're going to receive every year for 10 years. We want to find the future value of that annuity. So we multiply it by our FVIFA. N is equal to 10, I is equal to 8%. And we find that the terminal value of the project is $322,341. And that indeed goes into the numerator of this equation right here. And so with that, we can now calculate the modified internal rate of return. Now, on your calculator, there's a key that reads y to the x. That's the key that we're going to use to be able to do the modified internal rate of return. Now, x is going to end up being that exponent over there, 1/10. The decimal equivalent of that, of course, being 0.10. So when I tell you to raise it to the 1/10 power, you're really going to input in your calculator 0.1. 322, 341, 34 divided by 100,000. Figure out what that is and press the y to the x key one time. And you just made that number y. We're now going to input the exponent, which is 0.10. Input 0.1 and press the y to the x key again. And you not only put 0.1 as x, but what you have in your calculator at that point is 1.1242. Subtract 1 from that, you'll get 0.1242, which is the decimal equivalent of 12.42%, which is the modified internal rate of return. Now, in this problem now, one of the things we're able to get around now is this reinvestment rate assumption. We don't like having to assume that we reinvest at 18% a year. This point right here is where we're able to define our reinvestment rate. Now, textbooks will tell you that you should use the firm's cost of capital, which we did in this case, which is 8%. But what you should put in there now is whatever you think is a reasonable reinvestment rate. If you think it's reasonable to assume that you could earn 9% or 9.5% or whatever it is, then put that number in there. That's what you should use. But at this point right here now, this is when we're able to get around the reinvestment rate assumption that we talked about earlier. This allows us to do that. So when we calculate the modified internal rate of return, we're assuming that we reinvest all the cash flows, but we're assuming that we reinvest these cash flows somewhere to earn 8% interest. Now the reason that we like modified internal rate of return is we'll tell the boss, you know, if we invest $100,000 today and we reinvest all these cash flows, then 10 years from today, all that reinvested cash flow is going to be worth $322,341. If we invest $100,000 in an investment today, and from that investment we get $322,341 10 years from today, our annualized rate of return on that investment would be exactly 12.42%. Now, this is a good number. This is the number that you should tell your boss or your client that you can earn as a rate of return. Again, it assumes we reinvest all the cash flows, but it assumes we reinvest them somewhere to earn what? This rate of return right here, which is less than 18%. We're much more likely to earn 8% than 18%. But that's where we get around the reinvestment rate assumption. And that's why we like modified internal rate of return. That's why, as a finance person now, you shouldn't give out this traditional rate of return to a client or a boss. It's a little misleading, may not be achievable. On the other hand, modified internal rate of return, that is the number that we want to give out. Now, what we've done here in capital budgeting now, we've gone through net present value, internal rate of return, the profitability index, the payback technique, and now the modified internal rate of return. Those are the 5 capital budgeting techniques that you need to be familiar with.